What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Take Talk Sports Podcast. Back with another video. Today, I'm going to be talking about the Mavericks and the Bucks, specifically what is wrong with them. Now, recently, the NBA playoffs have obviously been going on, and the Mavericks were recently bounced from the first round by the Clippers, and a lot of talk has gone on about what is wrong with them. So I wanted to get into that today because I feel I have my own opinions on that matter that are different from the ones swirling around right now. And I also want to touch on the Bucks and what is wrong with them. They are currently down 2-0 to the Nets. And obviously I picked them to get to the finals for me and even win them in my last video. So I wanted to get into what is wrong with them. Even though their series is still going on, I think I have somewhat of an idea of what is going wrong. Now, first things first, getting into the Mavericks. What is wrong with the Mavericks? Now, there's been a lot of opinions getting put around about what is wrong with the Mavericks. And I think the most common one and probably the most founded one is the lack of support around Luka. And I said it in my last video, that was the problem. There's no question that's the problem. And that needs to be solved this offseason before Luka gets any ideas about going anywhere else. Now, however, what's different for me is a lot of people are going straight for a Porzingis, and I am guilty of this myself. I got into it a little bit with Omar and even a little bit with my last video. And I know I've talked about it with my friends that I thought Porzingis really underperformed and put most of the blame on Porzingis. Now, Porzingis certainly did not perform well during the series. But as a number two, he's been getting a lot of criticism, people saying he's not a co-star, he's not the guy who's going to be a number two on a championship team. And I think if you're just looking at that playoff series, that's correct. But I did a little bit of research to see what he did in the regular season. He averaged 20 points per game, 9 rebounds, 47% from the field, and 37 from three. Now, he also only played around 43 games, which is a little over half of the season. And that's not great, but he also played all 7 games of the first round. So I'm not actually going to read into that too much. He's always had a bit of injury problems. I think they were overly cautious with him this year. So I'm not going to read into his lack of games too much. But those stats, 20 points per game, 9 rebounds on 47 from the field, although those don't blow you away as a number two, you'd rather be mid-20s in the points per game category, that is a solid number two option. You would take that in the playoffs. Of course, you'd want him to turn it up in the playoffs, but that is a solid number two. But obviously, as we saw, they were significantly lower for a number two in the playoffs. He wasn't performing. He wasn't hitting as many threes as people probably want him to. But I think he's receiving blame unfairly. And he actually said it himself. He felt that he was not given enough of a role or enough of a significant role in that playoff series. And he didn't feel like a co-star. He felt like it was being given to Luka every time. And honestly, he's not wrong. I was saying this during the regular season, or not regular season, during the playoff series, that something seemed wrong with Porzingis and that something seemed off. And I think what it was he was unhappy. He was unhappy with what his role was in that series and what he was being allowed to do and what he wasn't being allowed to do. And I was putting blame on Porzingis for not scoring and not performing and not getting buckets in the ISO and taking the pressure off Luka. And I don't think that's his fault. I think it's coaching. I think the coaching as far as Porzingis went was poor. Because as we've seen in the past, we've seen it almost every year he's played. Porzingis needs rhythm, and we saw it when he got injured, and he took probably half a season to really get his rhythm back. But once he did, he was in all-star form. He was amazing in last year's playoffs. And it's because they were going to him. They were giving him chances on the block significantly in a significant number throughout the game. And he was able to get that rhythm that he so desperately needs as a player. And that's not unusual, by the way. It is not something that should be held against him that he needs to get a rhythm. That is a common thing seen amongst some of the better players is they need their rhythm. And when a guy like Porzingis, a rhythm player, is stuck in the wings and stuck on the three-point line like he seemingly was in this series, it's almost impossible to get his rhythm. Forget the fact that without any actual chances to score on the block, he's not going to get points on the block. But he's just not going to get his rhythm. He's not going to hit threes. He's going to be out of it throughout the game. And that's what we saw in this playoff series. I think the coaching staff really needed to do a better job of giving him his chances on the block. I honestly cannot remember a single time where a play was ran for him during that series to get him a chance on the block and to give him a chance to work on somebody, because most of the time he had a shorter player on him. Now, Porzingis is not known for bodying a shorter player, and I'm not saying he would, but he commonly turns around, shoots a jump shot right over them, and scores it most of the time, and he was not given that chance in this series, and I think that was a big mistake. I think it's hurt Porzingis' stock unfairly. Yes, Porzingis should have hit more shots, and he should have played a bit better, but I think to play as a number 2, he needed to be given more chances, and he just wasn't. So I think he's being unfairly blamed, and I want it to be put out there that it is not all his fault. Other role players were underperforming, and he needed to be given better chances. So I think part of the blame needs to go towards the coaching. That said, I think the coaching was good as far as Porzingis, or as far as Luka plays went, and as far as that went in general. I just think they needed to give Porzingis more chances to give him his rhythm and to give him a chance to get involved. Now, what is the solution? Besides giving him more chances in the playoffs, if Porzingis is going to play like that, I think they do need a new number 2 or a number 3/2, because that's kind of what Porzingis is. He's not necessarily a 2 yet, but he's also a bit better than a number 3 option if given the chance. But if they were to get a number 2, there's obviously quite a few options that are out there. I think the best, but also most unrealistic, being Damian Lillard possibly seeking out a trade this year. That's not confirmed, but there's a lot of speculation around that. And if that is the chance, then they need to do everything they can to go after him, because Lillard and Luka would probably be ridiculous. Not to mention, if Porzingis stayed on the team, that would be unbelievable. But more realistic, I think the best option is Bradley Beal. Bradley Beal was amazing last year, one of the best scorers in the NBA, one of the best ISO scorers, can just get a bucket whenever he needs to, and he has recently shown some disinterest with staying with the Wizards, and I don't believe he's a free agent. However, I think they'd be able to trade for him. And I think even if you depending on what the trade is, even if you have to give up a guy like Porzingis, you'd have to get a little bit more than Beal, I think, to give up Porzingis. And by a little bit more, I mean a second round or another role player. I don't mean another star, but I think to get rid of Porzingis, I think he's better than people are thinking, and I don't think they should sell him short. So I think they need to find a good balance. But if they were to get a guy like Beal, that's almost exactly who I think Luka needs. Beal is a spot-up shooter who's going to knock it down, but he's also going to score ISO on whoever guards him, and it would take the pressure off him, like we saw in the Clippers series where he was getting doubled every play, and you can't do that when Beal's on the floor. So if they do pull off a trade for Beal, I think that's perfect. I honestly almost think that's better than a trade for Damian Lillard, given that Lillard and Luka would both need to be on the ball a significant amount, whereas I think Beal can work off the ball just as well as he can work on it. And some other guys who could be a 3/2, strong players, but not necessarily a 2. Kyle Lowry is one who's going to be a free agent. They could go after him. I don't love that, but he does bring a lot of intangibles to the floor. And the other guy who I actually quite like a lot is DeMar DeRozan. DeMar DeRozan is going to be a free agent. He's another guy who can get a bucket whenever he wants. It would take the pressure off Luka. And I think he would probably have a great season with them, because he would not have all the attention on him, and he would be able to score quite a bit. So just, they need to go after someone who can do one of two things, and that's either who can score whenever they want to off the ISO to take the pressure off Luka, or someone who provides massive intangibles, someone like Kyle Lowry who provides defense, physicality, passing, and a bit of scoring, someone who provides a lot. So they got to find someone. But the point that I want you to remember from this is that the blame does not fall solely on Porzingis, and I think that's an important thing that's getting overlooked. Now, the second point I obviously wanted to get into was the Bucks. What is wrong with the Bucks? Now, I don't necessarily have a reason exactly of what is. I mean, obviously I know what's wrong with them, but I don't exactly have a solution for them. But I wanted to say this because I think the success of Brooklyn is getting a bit overblown in this series. What do I mean by that? The Nets are playing slightly better than they were in the regular season, and I have stats that I'm going to talk about to show how that's true. But they are only playing slightly better than they were in the regular season, and the Bucks are playing way, way below. And I don't think it's because of the Nets. Bucks in the regular season, 120 points per game, 48 rebounds, 38.9% from three, and 76% free throws. In the playoffs versus Brooklyn specifically, in these first two games, 96.5 points per game, almost 25 points less, 24% from three, almost 14% less from three than they were in the regular season, 44% from the field, which is around what they did in the regular season, but 53% from the free throw line. And just all around that is way lower. And we know it's not because of Brooklyn, because they don't have a lick of defense on that team. So we know it's not them stopping them. I think for whatever reason, the Bucks are just playing awful in these first two games, and I think that the Nets shouldn't get credited for Brooklyn playing bad. This isn't like for Milwaukee playing bad. This isn't like when Milwaukee played the Raptors and the Raptors had an excellent coaching plan to slow down Giannis, and they had Kawhi and they played amazing defense. This isn't that. I think the Nets are playing how the Nets play, and there's nothing massively special about it. Not to mention they have Kevin Durant, so that's a factor that is always going to beat a team. But I think the Nets are. This sounds silly, but I think the Nets are getting too much credit because I think that Milwaukee is almost beating themselves here. They're playing so bad. The role players are underperforming so massively that the role players are not hitting shots. Giannis needs to do more. Giannis is playing well and he's scoring well, but there's a lack of confidence to him that he needs to do more, and he needs to be more aggressive, and he needs to be more assertive, because they're not playing him super. They're not playing a wall like most teams would. A lot of the time, they're just putting Blake Griffin on him, and he's working on him most of the game, but he needs to do it more. He needs to put more pressure. He needs to put more pressure defensively on guys like Kevin Durant. Obviously, like I said before, he's doing well in those areas, but he needs to do more. If his team is going to play this bad, he needs to do more, and he needs to step up, and I think he will. Chris Middleton and Drew Holiday also need to do a bit more. All in all, they're just underperforming. And I think obviously it's sad and it's not great that they're underperforming, but we saw how well they did in the first round. They were doing above their average stats in the regular season against Miami, and now they've just completely dropped the ball. They look a bit stunned. And so their solution is hit more shots. You know, it's everyone's solution, but it's got to be a solution. They got to lock in. They're coming back home for these next two games. Hopefully they get their rhythm back and they can really perform well to prove my predictions right. But more than that, I want them to beat Brooklyn for reasons I stated in my sports update video. If you didn't watch that, a little brief summary is I think if the Nets win, teams will try to model their model of offense only. And if Milwaukee wins, teams will try to model their model of defense and pace. And obviously, I think defense and pace will be a more not only entertaining and interesting form of play in the NBA, but also it will work better than offense. I think if teams try to replicate what Brooklyn is doing, it's just not going to work because Brooklyn has Kevin Durant and no other team will. So overall, the Bucks are underperforming and they need to pull it back. But that's really all I have for the Bucks. You know, hopefully they get it back, and hopefully that series gets interesting quick, because it was supposed to be an intriguing series, and right now it's just a blowout. So that's it for me, guys. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any thoughts on what I said about either the Mavericks or the Bucks, please be sure to leave them in the comments. If you have any ideas or things you want to see me talk about in a video, also leave those in the comments. Make sure you guys like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.